The first thing I heard after dying was Dylan Mercer laughing. For a second, I thought death had a cruel sense of humor. Then someone bumped my shoulder hard enough to slosh coffee over the rim of a paper cup, and the smell of burnt espresso hit me with such ordinary force that I opened my eyes. I was standing inside Northbridge University's Student Center, not the renovated one with the glass atrium and polished concrete floors I remembered from alumni photos years later. The old one, the one with mustard-colored walls, scratched tables, and a bulletin board covered in flyers advertising tutoring jobs, improv auditions, blood drives, and a campus startup mixer. My hands were young. That was what I noticed first. No pale scar near my thumb from the broken wineglass I'd picked up the night I discovered Dylan and Tessa together. No faint line around my ring finger from the cheap silver band Dylan had once given me after we'd lived together for 6 years, and still couldn't agree on marriage. My phone buzzed. Dylan, patio, 5 minutes, don't make me eat both desserts. My stomach turned. I remembered this night, of course I remembered it. It had been our first real date. Not the awkward coffee we'd had after intro to microeconomics. Not the library study sessions where he kept stealing my highlighters and grinning until I stopped pretending to be annoyed. This was the night he'd told me he liked me. The night I'd missed an email from Professor Elena Ruiz because I'd been too busy deciding whether Dylan's hand on the small of my back meant something serious. The night I had begun arranging my life around him. 12 years later, I had found him in our apartment with my best friend. 3 weeks after that, while I was crossing Boylston Street in the rain with divorce lawyers' advertisements glowing above a bus shelter and absolutely nowhere I needed to be, headlights had turned the wet pavement white. Then nothing until now. My phone buzzed again. Dylan, Nora. I could see him through the student center windows. He was outside under a string of patio lights, 21 years old, handsome in the careless way that used to make me forgive him before he'd even apologized, dark blonde hair falling into his eyes, navy sweater, 2 plates of cheesecake between us, between the version of us that had happened. I should have hated him. Instead, looking at his young face, I felt something worse, grief. This Dylan had not cheated on me yet. He had not lied about business trips. He had not deleted messages from Tessa. He had not looked me in the eye after 8 years together and said, "You haven't been happy either," as if unhappiness and betrayal were the same act. He was just a college student waiting for a girl he liked. My knowledge of what he would become did not make him guilty tonight, but it did not obligate me to become the woman who would be hurt by him either. I typed slowly, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have agreed to tonight when I'm not sure I want to start something. That's unfair to you." The dots appeared almost immediately, stopped, appeared again. "You could have figured that out before I ordered dessert." I closed my eyes. "Fair, you're right, I'm sorry." I sent him enough money to cover my half, ignored the way my hands shook, and turned away from the window. That was when I saw Adrian Vale. At the time I didn't know him, not really. In my first life Adrian had been a blur at the edge of campus, a quiet student with 2 long brown hair, soft gray eyes, and the habit of sitting near exits. I remembered seeing him once in a lecture hall and once in the library years later. His face had appeared on the front page of a business magazine. The reluctant Vale, the billionaire heir who walked away from the family office. I had stared at the photograph for almost a full minute before realizing I'd gone to school with him. Now he was sitting alone at the far end of the student center, half hidden behind a pillar. He wore a washed-out gray sweatshirt and jeans that looked old enough to be genuinely old rather than designer distressed. His laptop was open, but he wasn't typing. 3 students from the entrepreneurship club stood near his table talking loudly. "Come on, Adrian," one of them said. "You can't just sit in the corner and pretend networking isn't part of business." His face went slightly red. "I wasn't pretending." "Then introduce yourself to someone." Adrian looked around as if the suggestion had been to perform surgery. The club president laughed, not cruelly. "Exactly, that almost made it worse. See, this is why you need us." Something in Adrian's expression made me stop, not because he looked pathetic, he looked tired. There was a difference I hadn't understood at 20 the first time around. I had spent half my first life chasing people who filled rooms. I had barely noticed the ones trying not to take up space. A chair scraped loudly behind me. I turned and saw Dylan storm back into the student center. His eyes found me immediately. "So you're not confused enough to leave," he said. Several heads turned. Heat climbed my neck. In my first life, public embarrassment had been one of my greatest fears. I would have followed him outside, apologized until I no longer remembered what I was apologizing for, and spent the rest of the night managing his feelings. This time I stayed where I was. I said I was sorry, by text. "You were 20 feet away." His jaw tightened. "Did somebody else ask you out?" There it was, not betrayal, not cruelty, just Insecurity wearing the costume of accusation, no. He looked over my shoulder toward Adrian. Adrian immediately lowered his eyes to his laptop. Dylan gave a short laugh. Seriously? Don't do that. Do what? Turn a conversation about us into a competition with some guy who hasn't said a word? Dylan stared at me for one strange second. I could see the man he might become and the boy he still was layered over each other. I thought you liked me. I do like you. That hurt him more. I saw it. I hated that I saw it. But liking you doesn't mean I should start a relationship I don't want. His mouth flattened. Fine. He turned before I could answer. The student center doors slammed behind him. Silence followed. Then someone whispered, "Damn." I exhaled slowly. My knees were trembling. So much for being the wise, composed woman who had returned from the dead. I sat down at the nearest empty table. Unfortunately, it was Adrian's. He looked at me. I looked at him. "Sorry," I said. "I can move." "No." His answer came too quickly. He cleared his throat. "I mean, you don't have to." Up close, I noticed a small ink mark on the side of his hand and a thin silver watch that looked ordinary until I remembered a photograph of Richard Vail wearing the same model. Adrian pushed a stack of papers out of my way. "You handled that well." I almost laughed. "I feel like I'm going to throw up." "That doesn't mean you handled it badly." There was no flirtation in his voice, no performance, just an observation. Something inside me loosened. "Are you always this comforting?" He considered the question with alarming seriousness. "No." I smiled despite myself. "Good to know." His laptop screen displayed a spreadsheet full of colored cells. "You were at the startup mixer." I asked. "Technically. But you're hiding." "Strategically." I laughed. This time he smiled too. It changed his whole face, not dramatically. That was the thing about Adrian. Everything about him happened quietly. A shift in his eyes, a small curve at one corner of his mouth, fingers relaxing around a coffee cup. "I hate mixers," he admitted. "Then why come?" He looked toward the bulletin board. A flyer for Professor Ruiz's student research lab was pinned between a rock climbing club advertisement and a notice about parking permits. I wanted to hear Professor Ruiz speak. My pulse changed. Professor Ruiz, the email. I snatched my phone from the table so quickly Adrian flinched. "Sorry." I searched my inbox. There it was, unread, exactly where it had been 12 years ago. Subject: research assistant. Opportunity. My breath caught. In my first life I had opened that email 2 days late. Ruiz had offered me an interview for a paid research position working with local nonprofit organizations. By the time I responded, she'd filled the position at 20. I'd shrugged it off. I had Dylan. There would be other opportunities, except there had always been another date, another weekend away, another emergency at his internship, another move for his job. Opportunities had not disappeared. I had simply developed the habit of making mine optional. "Are you okay?" Adrian asked. I read the email twice. Interview slots were tomorrow. I clicked the scheduling link. The last morning slot was still open. "I'm fine." My voice broke. Adrian looked away politely, which somehow made me want to cry more. I booked the interview. Then I sat back. Something had changed, not the world. The fluorescent lights still buzzed. Somebody was still arguing about printer credits at the help desk. Dylan was probably outside, furious with me, but my life had moved 1 inch off its old track, and 1 inch over enough distance could become miles. Adrian closed his laptop. His phone lit up beside him. He turned it face down. Too late. I caught only part of the notification. Vail Family Office. Proxy materials require signature before 5:00 p.m. My eyes lifted to his. He'd seen me see it. His expression shut down. I could have asked. The old Nora would have. The new Nora had spent less than an hour in her second life and had already learned one useful thing. Not every mystery needed to belong to me immediately, so I only said, "Good luck hiding strategically." For a moment he looked surprised, then amused. "Good luck with Professor Ruiz." I stood halfway to the stairs. I heard him call my name. "Nora." I turned. He looked uncomfortable again. "How do you know my name?" I glanced at the abandoned name sticker on my sweater. "Nora Bennett, Economics." "Oh." He looked down. His ears went red. I smiled. For the first time in either of my lives, I walked away from a man without wondering whether he would follow, and for the first time, someone I had once failed to notice remained in my mind long after I left. Professor Elena Ruiz did not ask me why I wanted the research position. She asked me what I thought I was wrong about. I stared at her across a desk overflowing with papers. Currently, preferably. It was 8:30 the next morning, and I'd slept less than 3 hours. Dylan had sent 4 messages overnight. The first was angry, the second was wounded, the third said he understood, the fourth asked whether we could still go to Saturday's hockey game. I hadn't answered yet. Professor Ruiz waited. She was in her early 50s with dark hair streaked silver and reading glasses attached to a bright red cord. I think I used to believe being needed was the same thing as being valued, I said. Her pen stopped. I had not planned to say that. Used to? I almost smiled. Recently, she leaned back. And what changed? I realized. Being useful can become a very convenient way not to ask what you actually want. Ruiz studied me long enough to make me uncomfortable, then she flipped my resume over. The work is boring. Good. You say that now? I like spreadsheets. That is either a strength or a cry for help. I laughed. She didn't. Then the corner of her mouth moved. The position involved analyzing spending patterns for small community organizations receiving restricted grants, nothing glamorous, mostly cleaning financial records, designing cash flow models, and helping organizations understand why having money on paper did not necessarily mean they could spend it. I wanted it so badly my chest hurt. Not because it was prestigious, because I remembered not having it. Ruiz offered me the job before 9. When I walked outside, the campus looked offensively beautiful. October sunlight spilled across red brick. Students crossed the quad carrying coffee and backpacks, unaware that I had died 12 years from now and been given back a morning. My phone rang. Tessa. I nearly dropped it. In my first life, Tessa Monroe had been the person I called after finding Dylan's messages. She had come to our apartment. She had cried with me. She had held my hands while I asked what I had done wrong. 3 days later, I discovered the other woman was her. I answered anyway. Hey, where are you? Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm, quick, slightly breathless. Outside Harrow Hall. You left before I woke up. I had an interview. Silence, then genuine excitement. You got the Ruiz interview? Yeah. Nora, that's huge. A sharp ache moved through me. People wanted villains to sound like villains. They rarely did. Tessa had loved me. That was what had made the betrayal unbearable. I got the job. She screamed loudly enough that I had to pull the phone from my ear. Students turned. I laughed before I could stop myself. Drinks tonight, she declared. My treat. You work 6 hours a week at the bookstore. Then water, fancy water. I closed my eyes. This was the Tessa I'd missed after hating her. The girl who cut her own bangs at midnight and regretted it before she finished. The girl who mailed half her work-study paycheck home when her mother fell behind on utilities. The girl who had once sat on the bathroom floor with me through food poisoning because I was afraid I'd pass out alone. People could love you and still hurt you, apparently. They could hurt you and still have loved you. I'll see you later, I said when I hung up. Dylan was standing 10 feet away. He held 2 coffees. Of course he did. That had always been one of his gifts. He remembered how people took their coffee. Peace offering. He lifted one. I hesitated before accepting it. Thanks. We sat on a low stone wall beside the economics building. I'm sorry about last night, he said. I looked at him. For being upset. For acting like you owed me something because I thought this was going somewhere. The answer surprised me. In my first life, I had remembered Dylan as if every flaw had been visible from the beginning. Memory was a dishonest editor. It cut scenes that complicated the ending. You had a right to be hurt. That's not the same thing. No, it wasn't. He stared at the quad. Is there someone else? No. The guy from last night. Adrian. His gaze sharpened. I regretted knowing the name so easily. No. Then what happened? How could I answer? I saw you 12 years from now with your mouth against my best friend's shoulder. You said you were lonely. You said we'd become roommates. You said, Tessa. Listen to you. You said it had only happened twice, and later I learned it had been 7 months. Instead, I said, I think I've been moving toward a relationship because it felt like the next thing I was supposed to do. He looked hurt again. So I'm a checklist. No, you're a person. That's why I'm stopping. He absorbed that. I don't like it. I know. But I get it. That was almost worse. If he'd shouted, I could have hated him. Instead, he stood and gave me a crooked smile. For the record, the cheesecake was excellent. I'm glad. I ate yours too. That part one expected. He laughed. For 1 second we were us, or the version of us that had once been possible. Then he walked away. I sat alone until my coffee went cold. By noon, Professor Ruiz had already emailed me a folder containing 6 months of anonymized financial statements from a community arts nonprofit. By 3, I was in the library trying to understand why the organization appeared profitable while repeatedly missing payroll, restricted donations. I looked up. Adrian stood across from me holding 3 books. What? He nodded toward my spreadsheet. 41% of their cash is probably restricted. I narrowed my eyes. You read my spreadsheet upside down. He seemed embarrassed, a little. That's unsettling. Sorry. Sit down. He did. I rotated the laptop toward him. Show me. 10 minutes later, he had identified 3 grant categories I'd misclassified. 20 minutes after that, we were arguing. About whether the organization needed a dashboard or a better chart of accounts. You can't fix management with software, I said. You can make bad management easier to see. That's a deeply computer science answer. You're the one color-coding cash restrictions. Because color has meaning, he smiled. That's a deeply economics answer. An hour disappeared, then another at 6. The library lights brightened automatically. Adrian glanced at the time and looked startled. I have to go. Family. Office. His face changed. I regretted it immediately. I'm sorry, I saw the notification yesterday. Forget I said anything. He packed his books too quickly. It's not. You don't owe me an explanation. That made him stop. I meant it. Mostly he looked at me for a long moment. Vale Holdings is my family. There it was. Not everything enough. I figured there might be a connection. You know the company. My mom's organization once rented space in a building your family owns. Technically true. I wasn't going to explain the magazine cover from 12 years in the future. His shoulders loosened by half an inch. It's complicated. Families usually are. He studied my face as if checking for a reaction he expected. Awe, suspicion, interest. I gave him none, not because I was noble, because I had already spent one life mistaking proximity to someone else's future for security. Adrian's money was interesting. Adrian was more interesting. He pointed at my spreadsheet. You could build something from this. From restricted grants. From the problem. He opened my notebook and wrote 3 words, cash visibility layer. I stared at them. He continued, more animated now. Small nonprofits don't need enterprise software. They need something simple that separates cash on hand from cash available for actual operating expenses. QuickBooks already exists. Accounting software tells you what happened. His eyes met mine. What if we help them see what happens next? Something electric went through me. Not romance, not yet recognition. In my first life, I had spent years telling myself I'd miss one research job, one internship, one promotion, one opportunity. As if each loss were isolated. They weren't. They had formed a pattern. Now another door had opened. This time I was looking at it. When's the campus venture competition? I asked. Adrian blinked. February. We have 4 months. We? He sounded alarmed. I smiled. You brought it up. That isn't legally binding. Good, because we'll need an actual founders agreement before it is. His eyebrows lifted. What? I read. That was not remotely the full explanation. He looked down at the words he'd written, then he smiled. Okay. My phone vibrated beside me. Tessa had sent a photograph. She and Dylan were at the bookstore cafe. He was making a face at the camera. She'd captioned it. Found your abandoned almost boyfriend. He says you owe him cheesecake. My hand went cold. Adrian noticed. Everything okay? I looked at the photograph again. In my first life, Dylan and Tessa had not become close until years later. Had they, or had I simply not noticed? The old fear rose so quickly it almost erased the room. Then I forced myself to look again. 2 college students, coffee, a joke, nothing else. Not yet, maybe never. I locked my phone. Yeah. Adrian didn't push. Outside the library windows, evening had turned the campus blue. I looked at our notes. At the beginning of an idea that had not existed in my first life. At a shy man I had barely noticed the first time I lived these years. The future had already changed. That should have comforted me. Instead, for the first time since waking up, I understood the most frightening part of being given a second chance. I did not actually know what happened next. We called the project Lumen because Adrian hated every name I suggested. Grand Sight sounds like software sold by a man wearing a headset. It explains the product. So does financial restriction cash forecasting platform. That's terrible. Exactly. Lumen, he shrugged. It means light. That's painfully earnest. You like it? I did. 3 weeks after my missed date with Dylan, Adrian and I were spending nearly every evening together, not dating. We were both careful about that. At least I was. Adrian seemed constitutionally incapable of assuming romantic interest unless someone submitted it in writing. We worked in the basement level of the university library where the Wi-Fi was bad and nobody cared if we spread financial statements across an entire table. Professor Ruiz had allowed us to use several anonymized datasets from organizations that had agreed to student research. She also established rules. No client names in the prototype, no identifying information, no importing actual financial records into personal accounts. And if this becomes a company, you get counsel before you start promising people things you don't understand. Adrian nodded. I nodded. She pointed at us. I mean it. We believe you, I said. You have the face of someone who believes rules are more flexible when she's read them carefully. Adrian coughed into his hand. I kicked his shoe under the table. The research itself fascinated me. Small organizations often looked financially healthy until you separated restricted funds from unrestricted operating cash. A foundation might give $50,000 for a specific youth program. That did not mean the executive director could use it to make payroll for unrelated staff. Lumen's earliest model was embarrassingly simple: import, categorize transactions, tag restrictions, forecast expected inflows, warn the user when actual spendable cash was likely to become dangerously thin. Adrian built the first working version in 9 days. I stared at it on his screen. That's it. He looked worried. Is it bad? No, I mean, you built it. You designed half the logic. I designed boxes on paper. Good boxes. I laughed. His face warmed. Those moments became dangerous. Not because he flirted, because he didn't. Dylan had always made attraction easy to identify: compliments, touches, jokes. That carried double meanings. With Adrian, intimacy accumulated quietly. He remembered that I hated mint tea. He started bringing an extra charger because mine failed constantly. He stopped choosing the seat closest to the door when we worked together, though I wasn't sure he noticed. Once, when I fell asleep over a forecasting model, I woke with his sweatshirt folded beneath my head. He was sitting 4 feet away in a t-shirt, shivering. You could have woken me. You look tired. So now you're freezing. I'm fine. You are visibly cold. I'm from Massachusetts. That is not a medical condition. He laughed so loudly someone shushed us. I stared. Adrian laughed differently when he forgot to be self-conscious. I liked that version of him more than I should have. Meanwhile, Dylan was becoming part of my life again in a different shape. He was in my entrepreneurial finance seminar, and because the universe apparently enjoyed testing me, our professor assigned him to review our venture team's financial assumptions. He took one look at Lumen's revenue model and frowned. You're charging nonprofits. We're charging organizations above a budget threshold, I said. Smaller groups get a free tier. Still sounds like making money off charities. Hosting costs money, support costs money. Investors will hate the margins. We don't have investors. He glanced at Adrian. Yet. Adrian looked down at his notes. Dylan had learned about the Vail connection, not from me. Someone from the Entrepreneurship Club had recognized the surname. The information spread in the vague, inaccurate way money always did on college campuses. Adrian's father owned half the East Coast. Adrian had a private jet. Adrian had a trust fund worth $5 billion. None of those things were exactly true. Some weren't exactly false either. Do you actually need this class? Dylan asked him one afternoon. Adrian looked confused. Yes. I mean financially. That's not what classes are for. I almost smiled. Dylan did not. I recognized something in his expression, the beginning of comparison. In our first life, Dylan had been ambitious. I had loved that about him. Later, ambition had hardened into a constant accounting of who had more money, more influence, more impressive titles. He could not enter a room without calculating where he stood. At 21, it was still only a small insecurity. I reminded myself of that. People were not condemned by their tendencies, only their choices. Tessa started coming to our work sessions because the bookstore cafe closed earlier than the library and she needed somewhere to study. She was majoring in communications and taking a brutal statistics requirement. Adrian tutored her once. Afterward, she looked at me as if I'd hidden a useful household appliance. Where did you find him? In a corner. Adrian nearly choked on his drink. Tessa grinned. Do you ever talk? Sometimes. Voluntarily. Less often now. She laughed. I watched them. No threat, no triangle, just people. It should not have required effort to understand that. But sometimes I looked at Tessa's hands and remembered them covering mine after she had already slept with Dylan. Sometimes Dylan leaned close to explain something and my body remembered the smell of his future cologne. Rebirth had restored my age. It had not restored my innocence. One night, Tessa caught me staring at her. What? Nothing. You do that lately. Do what? Look at me like I'm about to confess to murder. Guilt hit me. I'm sorry. She waited. I could not tell her the truth. I've been stressed. About Dylan? No. That answer came easily, too easily. Perhaps her expression changed. Not much. I noticed because I was watching now. Are you sure? Why? No reason. There it was, something small, not betrayal, interest, maybe the first seed. I felt my muscles tense. Then I remembered the photograph from the bookstore. The way she laughed around him, the future. I wanted to warn her, stay away from him, stay away from my life. But this was not my old life, and Dylan was not mine. If Tessa liked him now, there was no betrayal in that, only a consequence of the choice I had already made. I am sure, I said. She studied me, then nodded. Okay. That weekend, Professor Ruiz invited Lumen to apply for a university social venture grant, $10,000. For us, it felt enormous. The application required a business plan, pilot proposal, budget, and ownership disclosure. That last part made Adrian go quiet. We were sitting in a nearly empty computer lab when he stopped typing. What? I asked. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. Apparently, some phrases carry trauma across lifetimes. That sounds ominous. It isn't. You look like you're about to confess to offshore banking. His expression suggested the joke had landed too close. I sat up. Adrian. He rubbed the back of his neck. My family has a foundation. I know. We fund things. I assumed. The university receives funding from it. I waited. The social venture program, he nodded. Partly. How partly? Vail Foundation gave the initial endowment. I stared at him. You applied to a competition funded by your family without telling me. I didn't apply, we were invited. That's a technical distinction. I know. Would the judges know who you are? Probably. Would that affect the outcome? I don't know. His answer irritated me more than if he'd said yes. You have to know. I don't control the foundation. That isn't what I asked. He closed his laptop. The sound felt too loud. I have no voting role. I don't choose grants. My father chairs the board, but he isn't involved in student awards. Would they risk rejecting his son? Adrian flinched. I regretted the sharpness immediately. He looked toward the dark windows. This is why I don't tell people. What? They stopped seeing the actual question. My anger paused. What actual question? Whether our work is good. I said nothing. He stood. I'll withdraw from the application. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? The frustration in his voice surprised both of us. I realized I had no answer. In my first life, money had often been something Dylan and I chased. A better salary, a better apartment, a better neighborhood. Now money had entered the room through a man who seemed to want nothing to do with it. And I was afraid of what it would change. Transparency, I said finally. Adrian looked at me. I want to know the things that materially affect me. His face softened. That's fair. Not everything. I know. But this mattered. I know. He sat again. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked less shy than ashamed. My father has spent most of my life solving problems before I can decide whether I want them solved. That sounds convenient. It is. He met my eyes. That's part of the problem. I understood more than I wanted to. Privilege could be a cage and still be privilege. Pain did not erase advantage. Advantage did not erase pain. Both could be true. Withdraw your name from judging if that's possible, I said. I can ask. And we disclose the relationship in the application. Okay. If they won't confirm an independent review process, we don't take the grant. He nodded. Okay. My heart was still beating too fast. Then he said quietly, thank you. For what? For not leaving. The words hit somewhere deeper than they should have. I looked down. This isn't me promising I won't. I know. That was the right answer. The next morning, Professor Ruiz forwarded our disclosure request to the program director. By afternoon, we had written confirmation that Adrian would be treated as a related party, that his family's representatives would have no access to scoring, and that 2 external judges would review our application. It was boring, procedural, unromantic. I loved it. Reality did not require dramatic declarations when a conflict of interest could be handled by writing it down and establishing rules. We submitted the application at 11:47 that night, while Adrian and I were still in the library. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, his face drained. Everything okay? He stood immediately. My father. He walked several feet away before answering. I tried not to listen. I failed. No. Pause. I told them to disclose it. Another pause. No, Dad, I am not asking you to call anyone. His voice changed, still quiet, harder. I said no. He ended the call. When he turned back, something had closed behind his eyes. What happened? He looked at me, then at our application. My father knows about Lumen, and he wants to meet you. Every instinct I had developed across 2 lives told me that sentence was not an invitation. It was the beginning of a negotiation. Richard Vail did not look like a billionaire. He looked like someone's well-rested cardiologist. That was my first thought when he entered the private dining room of a Boston hotel 3 days later. No entourage, no obvious security, charcoal suit, navy tie, silver hair. He shook my hand and said, Nora Bennett, as if he had spent the morning reading about me, which I later discovered he had. Adrian stood beside me, visibly miserable. Do we have to do this here? He asked. Richard ignored him. I hope this wasn't inconvenient. It was, I said. Adrian's head turned sharply. Richard smiled, not offended, interested. Good. I had work. Also good. He sat. I had expected arrogance. What unsettled me was efficiency. Within 10 minutes, Richard understood Lumen's model better than some competition judges probably would. He asked about customer acquisition costs, annual contract values, data security, and whether our forecasting logic could be replicated by existing accounting platforms. He did not once praise Adrian. I began to understand why Adrian disappeared in rooms. His father occupied them without raising his voice. We're not raising capital, Adrian said for the third time. Richard folded his hands. You will, eventually. Then eventually arrives faster if you stop pretending capital is morally contaminating. I don't think that. You behave as if you do. I looked between them. This meeting had almost nothing to do with me. That didn't make me less involved. Richard turned toward me. If you receive outside funding, what ownership percentage would you consider? I wouldn't decide based on a percentage in isolation. He lifted an eyebrow. Explain. Valuation, liquidation preferences, board rights, protective provisions, pro rata rights, information rights. 10% can be more expensive than 20 depending on the terms. Adrian looked at me. Richard smiled for the first time with actual warmth. Professor Ruiz. Mostly reading. Good. He slid a folder across the table. I did not touch it. What is that? A starting point. Adrian's chair moved. No. Richard looked at him. Sit down. I'm not 12. Then stop behaving as if hearing an offer compromises your independence. Adrian went still. I hated the way Richard had said it. I also hated that part of me wanted to open the folder. Money had a physical gravity. Anyone who claimed otherwise had probably never needed it. I opened the folder. The proposal was not predatory. That almost made it more dangerous. Vale Ventures would provide $500,000 in seed funding through a preferred equity financing once Lumen Incorporated. In exchange, they wanted a significant minority stake, one board seat after a defined financing threshold, standard information rights, and a right to participate in future rounds. Nothing absurd. Nothing like the fictional contracts where investors somehow owned your soul and your grandmother's house. But there was also a strategic approval provision covering any sale or exclusive license of core intellectual property. I tapped the page. This, Richard nodded. We don't invest in software we can be cut out of. We? Vale Ventures. Adrian said. He doesn't control it. He doesn't. Adrian's expression tightened. That's not the point. Richard looked at him. Then make the point. I told you I don't want family money. And I continue to wonder whether you mean family control. I mean both. The air changed. There it was, not business history. Richard leaned back. Your brother also believed refusing help made him free. Adrian went pale. Don't. I am not discussing Thomas. You just did. Because you keep confusing distance with independence. Adrian stood. This time Richard did not tell him to sit. I'm leaving. I closed the folder. So am I. Richard looked at me. You haven't heard the full proposal. We'll review anything formal through council. Something like approval passed across his face. Good answer. Outside the hotel, cold air hit us. Adrian walked half a block before stopping. I'm sorry. For your father. For all of it. I crossed my arms. Who was Thomas? He stared at the traffic. My brother. I waited. He died when I was 17. I'm sorry. He hated the company, hated the family attention, hated everyone deciding what he was before he walked into a room. A bus passed, briefly swallowing his next words. He spent years proving he didn't need anyone. What happened? Adrian's jaw tightened. Car accident. There was something he wasn't saying. I didn't push. He looked at me. I should have told you more. Yes. I kept thinking there would be a better time. There usually isn't. I know. No, I don't think you do. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. He flinched. I continued anyway. Your family funded the program. Your father knew about our company. You have access to people and resources I don't even know exist. Those aren't embarrassing personal details, Adrian. They affect decisions I'm making. I didn't use any of it. That's not the point. The moment the words left my mouth, I heard Richard. Adrian did too. He almost smiled. I didn't. I need you to understand something, I said. I have spent a lot of my life finding out important truths after they could have changed my decisions. He looked at me carefully. About Dylan. My breath stopped. I had never told him anything meaningful about Dylan. Why would you say that? You react to him like someone who already disappointed you. Too close. I looked away. That's complicated. A strange sadness crossed his face. Families usually are. He was quoting me. I wanted to laugh. Instead, my eyes burned. I don't want to build anything on missing information. Neither do I. But you are. I know. Silence stretched. Then he said, I'm a beneficiary of several family trusts. I have an economic interest in Vale. Holdings. I don't control the operating company, I don't control the foundation, I have some voting rights that increase later. I have enough money that pretending otherwise would be ridiculous. I said nothing. I don't fly private to campus. Despite myself, I laughed. Good. I own a very boring used Subaru. I've seen it. The watch was my brother's. My eyes dropped to his wrist. He touched it once. I didn't come to Northbridge to test people or see who liked me without money. That mattered. I came because Thomas went here. Oh. My father wanted me at Stanford, my mother wanted Princeton. Thomas came here because nobody in the family cared about Northbridge. He looked back toward the hotel. I thought if I lived quietly enough I could figure out which parts of my life were actually mine. I understood him then, not completely enough, and understanding someone was dangerous when you still needed to hold them accountable. You should have told me. I know. I need a few days. His face fell. I almost took it back. That was an old reflex too, protect the other person's feelings before they had to feel them. I did not. Okay, he said. He didn't ask how many. He didn't tell me I was overreacting. He didn't follow me when I walked toward the subway. For 4 days we communicated only about Lumen, short emails, clean task lists, no late night library sessions, no extra coffee. It hurt more than I expected. On the 5th day, Professor Ruiz found me pretending to analyze grant data. You're entering numbers into the wrong column. I stopped. Great. Relationship trouble. We're not in a relationship. Those are often the most troublesome. I gave her a look. She continued marking papers. Do you trust him? I don't know. Wrong question. What is the right one? Has he behaved in a way that can support trust going forward? I leaned back. He hit something important. Then the answer is not currently yes. Thank you. But trust is not a verdict. I frowned. She removed her glasses. It is a process. I hated when professors said simple things that ruined my carefully constructed arguments. That afternoon Adrian emailed me. I spoke to Maya Chan. She is an attorney who advises early-stage companies. She has no relationship with my family. She agreed to meet us through the University Entrepreneurship Clinic. No cost for the initial session. You can verify all of that directly. Below it was Maya's contact information. No pressure, no emotional appeal, just a concrete step that mattered too. 2 days later, Maya Chan sat across from us in a small conference room and dismantled our assumptions. You do not have a company, she said. Adrian glanced at me. We have a prototype. You have code and enthusiasm. She looked at me. You two have discussed ownership. 50-50. Based on? We said nothing exactly. For the next hour, she explained founder equity, vesting, intellectual property assignment, confidentiality, data handling, and why handshake arrangements became expensive once money arrived. Also, she said, an idea is not a magic object you can lock in a safe. If your value is in code, specific models, customer relationships, confidential processes, or proprietary data organization, treat those things accordingly. I took notes until my wrist hurt. Adrian listened even more intently. At the end, Maya pushed a sample checklist toward us. Decide whether you're actually partners before you incorporate. I looked at Adrian. He met my eyes. That was the problem. Professionally, I trusted what he did. Personally, I was not sure I trusted what he withheld. And somewhere between those two truths, something had already started to matter too much. I accused Tessa of betraying me on a Tuesday. She hadn't. That mistake became one of the most important moments of my second life. Lumen had been invited to present at the university's Winter Venture Showcase. Our prototype was still ugly, but it worked. More importantly, 2 nonprofit directors had agreed to test it using dummy data before considering a formal pilot. We had incorporated as Lumen Forecasting, Inc. with an ordinary Delaware C corporation structure because Maya said it would make future institutional investment cleaner if we ever went that route. Our founder stock was subject to 4-year vesting. We signed invention assignment agreements. We put the code in a private repository. We created access rules. Dylan, who had become unexpectedly useful in our finance seminar, volunteered to help us refine the pricing model for class credit. Maya made him sign a confidentiality agreement before we gave him access to internal materials. He laughed when I handed it to him. You think I'm going to steal your spreadsheet? No. Then why the NDA? Because good procedures aren't personal. He looked at Adrian. That one of his rules. Mine. Dylan signed for a while. Things were almost easy. He was good at customer interviews, better than I was. People liked talking to him. And he understood immediately when a nonprofit director was being polite rather than interested. I remembered why I'd fallen in love with him. That didn't mean I wanted to again. Tessa and Dylan started dating in December. She told me before their first official date. That mattered. She sat cross-legged on our dorm room floor holding a sweater against herself. Is this weird? Yes, no. Nora, I sighed. It's a little weird. I won't go if. No. The speed of my answer surprised us both. I forced myself to breathe. You don't need permission from me. I know, I just don't want to hurt you. Once, years from now, she would say the same thing after it was too late. The memory cut so sharply I almost hated her for something she had not done. I don't want him, I said. That was true. Then why do you look like you're about to cry? Because I remembered losing both of you. Because I remembered sitting at a kitchen table while you told me that Dylan had been lonely, and you had been lonely, and neither of you meant for it to happen, because maybe in some terrible way I still love the versions of you who destroyed me. I think I'm tired. Tessa didn't believe me, but she went on the date. 2 weeks later, I found out a competing team at the university showcase had added a feature suspiciously similar to Lumen's restricted cache forecast. I went cold. The feature itself was not patentable magic. Any competent accountant could describe the underlying problem, but the competitor's slide used language almost identical to a phrase from our internal deck. Available operating cache versus nominal cache position. I had written that sentence at 2 in the morning. In a document only 5 people could access: me, Adrian, Professor Ruiz, Dylan, and Tessa. Because I'd once logged into the shared folder on her laptop and apparently failed to sign out, I stared at the access list. My past rushed into the room before reason did. Tessa, of course, Tessa. I found her outside the bookstore. Did you send someone our deck? She froze. What? The Lumen deck? No. Did anyone use your laptop? Her expression changed from confusion to hurt. Nora, what is this? Just answer. No. Did Dylan? She stared at me. Why are you asking like that? Because someone has our language. So you had access. Her face went white. I had access because you used my laptop. I know. And now you're accusing me of stealing from you. I'm asking. No, you're not. People moved around us carrying bags and coffee. Tessa lowered her voice. You've been waiting for me to do something wrong all semester. My chest tightened. That's not true. It is. You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it. I couldn't. She laughed once. There were tears in her eyes. You look at me like you hate me sometimes. I said nothing. That was answer enough. She stepped back. Whatever you think I did, I didn't. Then she walked away. I stood there feeling sick. Adrian found me 20 minutes later because I had missed our meeting. I told him everything except the part involving another lifetime. He listened, then asked one question. Do you have evidence Tessa accessed the file? No. Do you have evidence anyone did? Not yet. He nodded. Then we find out. Not confront, not punish, find out. We contacted University IT because the folder was hosted through a campus collaboration platform. The audit log took a day. The result made me want to disappear. Tessa's account had not accessed the deck in 6 weeks. The copied phrase had come from a document attached to our Venture Showcase application. The review committee used a shared folder. One student judge had downloaded all team materials to a local laptop. The competitor had used that laptop during a preparation session. Sloppy access. No evidence of intentional theft. No conspiracy. No Tessa. I walked back to our dorm feeling 12 years of certainty collapse inside me. Tessa was packing an overnight bag. She looked at me once. I know, I said. She continued folding a shirt. I was wrong. Nothing. I checked the logs. Still nothing. You didn't access it. I told you that. I know. Do you? Her voice broke. I sat on my bed. I'm sorry. Why me? I looked at the floor. Because I was scared. Of me? Yes. That hurt her. I saw it happen. Why? I could not tell her the truth, so I told her part of it. Because sometimes I assume the people closest to me are the ones most capable of hurting me. She stared. That's incredibly unfair. Yes. I have never done anything to you. Not yet. The thought came. Automatically, I hated myself for it. You're right. She zipped her bag. I'm staying with Aaron tonight. Tessa. No, you don't get to say something like that and make it better because you apologized quickly. She left, the door shut. I sat alone. When I had imagined a second life, I had imagined being wiser. I had not considered that knowing one possible future could make me cruel in the present. Adrian came by later with takeout. He found me sitting on the floor. I hurt her. He handed me chopsticks. Yes. I looked at him. You're supposed to comfort me. I brought noodles. Emotionally. I'm not qualified. I laughed weakly, then I started crying. Adrian set his food aside. He did not touch me. That was another thing I had come to understand about him. He waited, always, so I moved first. I leaned against his shoulder. He went completely still. Adrian? Yes. You can breathe. I am. You aren't. He exhaled. I closed my eyes. I thought a second chance would mean I knew how to avoid Mistakes? He was quiet, then he said, second chance at what? My heart stopped. I had said too much. College? Nora? I sat up, his eyes were on me, too observant, too patient. I looked away. I mean, I wasted a lot of time before this semester. He knew I was lying, I knew he knew, but he let me keep the lie that should have comforted me. Instead, it reminded me of every missing truth between us. I owe you something too, he said. I looked back. He told me everything he had not told me before, the trusts, his family's ownership structure, his future voting rights, the fact that business reporters estimated his beneficial interest at an amount so high I stopped processing the number. He explained that most of it was not cash he could simply withdraw. He explained that Richard controlled several family entities but did not legally control Adrian's personal accounts. He explained that Thomas had hated being treated as an extension of the Veil brand. He died after driving drunk. Adrian said quietly. I stared. Your father said it was an accident. It was. He looked at his hands. It was also the fourth time he'd driven after drinking that year. Pain moved across his face without drama. My father thinks if he controls enough variables, nobody else will die. I understood Richard differently then, not better, differently. And you? I think if I tell people as little as possible, they can't use anything against me. His eyes met mine. Also not healthy. No. No. We sat in silence. Then I said, I don't need every private detail. I know. I need the ones that change my choices. I know. And if you don't know whether something matters, tell me anyway. He nodded. Okay. I hesitated, then I held out my hand, not romantically, not exactly. A new rule. He looked at it. No important surprises. He shook my hand. No important surprises. His fingers were warm. Neither of us let go immediately. That was the night our relationship began changing, not because we kissed, we didn't, not because he saved me, he hadn't. It changed because both of us had shown each other something ugly. My suspicion, his secrecy, and neither of us had pretended the ugliness was romantic. The next morning I apologized to Tessa again. She accepted the apology. She did not forgive me immediately. That mattered too. Some things required time. By February, we were speaking normally again, not quite the same, maybe that was healthier. At the venture showcase, Lumen won second place, $25,000 in non-dilutive grant funding. No family money, no special judging. After the announcement, Adrian found me in the hallway outside the auditorium. Everyone else was celebrating inside. You left, I said. Too many people. Strategic hiding. He smiled. Less strategic now. I leaned against the wall beside him. We did it. You did. We? His eyes met mine. Something warm and terrifying passed between us. He moved half an inch closer, then stopped, waiting. I should have kissed him. Part of me wanted to. Instead, my phone rang. Dylan. I answered because he was part of the team. His voice was bright. Nora, you need to come back in here. There's someone from Wexler Capital asking about Lumen. Adrian's expression changed. Wexler Capital was not his family, which meant for the first time someone outside the Veil orbit had noticed us. I looked at Adrian. He looked at me. The almost kiss disappeared. Something bigger had arrived. Wexler did not invest. That turned out to be one of the best things that could have happened to us. They liked Lumen. They liked the problem. They liked Adrian's technical background. They liked my customer research. What they did not like was the market size. Nonprofits are slow buyers, the associate told us. Budgets are fragmented. Sales cycles can be painful. All true. I waited for the old panic to arrive. The feeling that one rejection meant I'd missed my only chance. It didn't. Instead, I asked, what would change your mind? The associate smiled. 20 paying customers. So we went looking for 20. Professor Ruiz introduced us to 3 organizations. Those introductions became one pilot became 2. Then nothing happened for 6 weeks. That was entrepreneurship without cinematic music. Emails ignored, calls rescheduled. A director who loved the product but had no budget authority. A finance manager who wanted features that would take 6 months. One board treasurer who spent 45 minutes explaining why spreadsheets had worked perfectly well since 1987. Adrian and I fought for the first time over pricing. You keep discounting, he said. They can't afford it. Some can. How do you know? Because they tell us their software budgets. That doesn't mean they want to spend it on us. If we underprice because we feel guilty, we can't support them. I hated that he was right. You sound like your father. He went quiet. I immediately regretted it. That was cheap. Yes, I'm sorry. He nodded once, then said, you sound like you're afraid money makes the work less good. That hit harder. My mother had spent 20 years running a community center where asking for enough money always felt vaguely immoral. I had inherited more of that than I'd realized. We raised the price. 2 customers said no, 3 said yes. Life continued. Dylan remained involved through the spring semester. He was dating Tessa now, really dating her. They were happy in the visible, uncomplicated way young couples often were before life found their fault lines. Sometimes I saw them together and felt nothing. Sometimes grief hit me so hard I had to leave the room, not because I wanted Dylan, because I remembered a future that no longer existed. There was no socially acceptable form of mourning for a life only I remembered. Adrian noticed anyway. One night after a client meeting, he and I walked across campus beneath trees heavy with spring rain. "You miss him?" he asked. "Dylan?" He nodded. "No." That wasn't convincing. "I miss something." He waited. "The person I thought he was, maybe." Adrian's hands were in his coat pockets. "That's still missing." "Someone." "Do you miss your brother or who you thought he could become?" He looked at me. That was aggressive. "Sorry." "No." He looked ahead. "Both?" We walked another block, then he said, "Thomas was funny." It was the first time Adrian had described his brother as anything other than a tragedy. He could imitate our father perfectly, voice, posture, everything. I smiled. "Did Richard hate it?" "He pretended to." "He sounds like a man who pretends a lot." "So do you." I stopped walking. Adrian did too. "What does that mean?" His expression changed. He had not intended to say it. "Nothing. Important surprises rule." "That's not what that rule means." "Convenient," he exhaled. "You act like you're older than everyone." Cold moved through me. "What?" "You don't just make decisions, you react like you've already seen the consequences." I said nothing. "Sometimes you look at Dylan like you're remembering something." The rain softened, campus lights blurred on wet pavement. He had gotten too close to the truth. I should have lied. Instead I asked, "If I told you something impossible, would you believe me?" His face changed. "Probably not immediately." I laughed despite the fear. "Fair. But I'd listen." That was Adrian, not blind faith, not dismissal, listening. I stared at him and almost told him about the apartment, the accident, waking up, everything. Then I imagined what happened after. Would every choice between us become contaminated by the idea that I had selected him because I'd known he would be rich? Would he wonder whether I loved him or the future version from a magazine cover? I couldn't do it, not yet. "I've had a bad few years," I said. "Technically true. In my head, also true. I think I'm trying so hard not to repeat old mistakes that I sometimes treat people like outcomes instead of people." He looked at me for a long moment. "That's the most honest thing you've ever said to me." The irony almost hurt. Then he stepped closer. "Can I kiss you?" My heart lurched. Dylan had kissed me first without asking. I had loved that once, the confidence, the certainty. Now Adrian stood in the rain, visibly nervous, giving me room to say no. "Yes." The kiss was gentle, almost too gentle. Then I touched the front of his coat, and something in him relaxed. He kissed me again, warmer, still careful. When we separated, his forehead rested briefly against mine. "I've wanted to do that for a while." "How long?" "Embarrassingly long." "Give me a number." "No." Important surprises rule. He laughed. "Absolutely not. For 3 months we were happy, not perfectly. Perfectly would have frightened me. We learned each other's habits." Adrian shut down when conversations became emotionally loud. I filled silence when I felt uncertain. He forgot meals while coding. I woke at 4 in the morning when stressed and reorganized spreadsheets nobody had asked me to reorganize. We had rules. No disappearing during arguments, no family money without discussion, no sacrificing important work to prove love. That last rule was mine. It was also the first one I broke. In August, my mother called. The community center's roof had failed inspection. Repairs would cost more than they had. I panicked. My first instinct was to use every dollar I'd saved. My second was worse. Ask Adrian. I hated myself for thinking it, so I didn't tell him anything. I missed 2 Lumen meetings. I took extra work. I stopped sleeping. Adrian found out from Tessa. He came to my apartment. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's my problem. Your mother's roof. My family's." "You told Tessa." "She knows my mom." "And I don't?" "That's not what I mean." He sat across from me. "Do you think I would offer money?" "Yes. I probably would." "Exactly. And you could say no." "I don't want to have to." He went quiet. I heard the cruelty after I said it. Money complicated care. That was true. But I had turned his generosity into something shameful before he'd even offered it. "I don't want your family's money in my life," I said more softly. His face changed. "My family's?" "Adrian." "No, I heard. You." "I didn't mean." "You did." He stood. "For months you've told me I need to stop treating money like something that makes me different from everyone else." "It does make you different." "Yes." He looked hurt now. "But apparently I'm only allowed to admit that when it's a disadvantage." I had no answer. He left. The next day, Richard Vale's office emailed a formal investment proposal for Lumen. $1 million better valuation, fewer control provisions, the kind of offer founders were supposed to celebrate. Adrian forwarded it to me with one sentence. I told him we are not accepting unless we both independently want it. I stared at the email. My mother needed a roof, Lumen needed money. I had spent my first life afraid of missing opportunities. Now opportunity sat directly in front of me. And for the first time I understood that saying yes could be just as dangerous as saying no. We rejected Richard's money, not because accepting it would have been immoral, because we could not separate the investment from Adrian's unresolved relationship with his father. Maya helped us write a polite response. Richard called Adrian. Adrian did not answer for 2 days. Then he did. I was not there for the conversation that mattered. Adrian's family was not my project to manage. We also found another way to repair my mother's roof. Professor Ruiz connected her with a local facilities grant program designed for community organizations. My mother applied. The grant covered 60%. The organization financed the rest. It took 6 weeks. No billionaire rescue, no dramatic check, just paperwork. It might have been the most emotionally satisfying outcome of my life. Then Adrian's identity became public. A business reporter covering Richard Vail's annual shareholder letter noticed that one of the student founders presenting at a regional startup conference had the same name as a rarely photographed Vail beneficiary. By the following morning, there were 3 articles. By afternoon, 7 Billionaire. Heir builds startup in college basement. Vail Son's charity software raises questions about campus privilege. The quotation marks around startup hurt most. Our 4 paying customers disappeared from the story. Our grant disappeared. Our months of work disappeared. Adrian became the only relevant fact. Then I became another one. One article described me as a scholarship student and business partner. As if my financial aid status were a personality. I wanted to scream. Adrian shut down completely. He stopped answering journalists, then friends, then me for 20 hours. Our rule had been no disappearing. At hour 8, I was worried. At hour 12, angry. At hour 20, furious. I found him at his apartment. He opened the door looking like he had not slept. You vanished. I needed space. You needed to send 4 words. Nora, I'm safe, need space. He closed his eyes. I know. No, you're saying that because I'm standing here. What do you want me to do? Communicate. I can't do this. Right now. There will always be a right now. His eyes opened. What does that mean? It means you keep acting like silence is neutral. He stared. It isn't. I had spent years in my first life watching Dylan explain too much, excuses, stories, versions. Adrian did the opposite. He withdrew until other people had to build explanations around the empty space. Both could destroy trust. I am trying, he said. I know. Do you? Yes. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Trying does not mean succeeding. His face hardened. You're good at that. At what? Grading people. The words landed cleanly. I stepped back. He looked as if he wanted to take them back. I did not let him. Say the rest. Nora. Say it. He rubbed both hands over his face. You always know the rule, the right procedure, the right boundary, the right lesson. My heartbeat slowed dangerously. And sometimes I don't know if you're actually living with me or evaluating whether I fit into a life you've already planned. The world went quiet. He did not know how close he had come. I could not breathe. You think I'm using you? No. Then what? I think you're afraid. I laughed once. Of course I'm afraid. So am I. Then why do I have to be the one who keeps dragging you back into the room? I never asked you to. There are sentences that end arguments. There are sentences that end relationships. That one almost did both. I looked at him. He looked horrified, but he had said it, and some part of him meant it. You're right, I whispered. Nora. You didn't ask me. I picked up my bag. He caught my wrist lightly, then released it immediately. Please don't leave like this. What would be the better way? I don't know. Exactly. I went home for 3 days. Neither of us reached out. On the 4th, we met with Maya because Lumen had an investor update call. Professional first. It was awful. Adrian sat across the conference table and looked at me only when necessary. We delivered the update. Our pilots were going well. Customer retention looked promising. The press attention had produced 32 inbound leads. Most useless, 6 legitimate. 1 investor wanted to meet. Success had chosen an inconvenient time. After the call, Maya packed her laptop. Are you two breaking up? I stared at her. Adrian looked at the table. She sighed. Fine, not my business, but decide whether company communication requires a protocol if you are. That was why I liked Maya. No sentimental speeches, just governance. We can work together, I said. Adrian nodded. Okay. The relationship ended that evening, not dramatically. He came to my apartment. We sat on the couch where he'd kissed me 100 times. I love you, he said. It was the first time either of us had said it. I cried. That is terrible timing. I know. I love you too. He looked wrecked. That almost broke me. But I don't think we know how to be together without turning our worst instincts into each other's responsibilities. He stared at his hands. I'm trying to change. So am I. Could we do that together? I wanted to say yes, every cell in my body wanted yes. The first time I lived, I had stayed in relationships because leaving felt like failure. I would not make staying a virtue this time, I don't know. He nodded slowly. Then we shouldn't pretend. We agreed to step back, no romantic relationship, clear company roles, weekly founder meeting with an agenda. Any conflict involving family, money, or governance went through Maya or our board advisor. It was devastatingly mature. I hated it. Tessa came over. After he left, she sat beside me without asking questions. Dylan arrived an hour later with pizza. I nearly laughed at the absurdity. In my first life, those two had been the reason I thought my life ended. Now they sat on my floor while I cried over someone else. History was not repeating. It had become unrecognizable. At midnight, Dylan said quietly, "For what it's worth, I think he'll come back." I wiped my face. That isn't the point. He looked confused. I understood why at 21 I would have been confused too. The point was not whether Adrian returned. The point was whether I could build a life that remained mine if he didn't. The next morning, I went to work. Lumen's first year after college was ugly, not tragic, ugly. We moved into a subleased office above a dentist in Cambridge because the rent was cheap. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant and peppermint. Our first employee quit after 9 weeks because a larger company offered him 40% more. A customer delayed payment. For 73 days our server bill doubled. We discovered that nonprofit finance teams did not want elegant dashboards if those dashboards required 12 extra clicks. We rebuilt half the product. Adrian and I became excellent business partners. That was almost worse than being bad ones. We had rules. He ran product and engineering. I ran operations, customer development, and finance. Major hiring required both founders. Any related party transaction required disclosure and approval. We spoke every day. We did not talk about love. For 6 months, Tessa graduated and took a communications job at Wexler Capital. Dylan joined a small consulting firm as an analyst. They stayed together. From the outside, they looked happy. From the inside, I suspected the cracks had started. Tessa called me one evening. Dylan asked if Adrian's family is going to invest. No. He thinks that's stupid. He is entitled to think stupid things. She laughed, then grew quiet. He compares himself to Adrian. I noticed. It makes him weird. How? Nothing serious. That phrase chilled me. Nothing serious. How many disasters began with those words? I forced myself not to project. Talk to him. I have. And he says I'm imagining it. That was not my problem to solve. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. She sounded disappointed. Once I would have taken responsibility for that disappointment. Now I let it exist. Lumen reached 18 paying customers. Then 23. Wexler called again. This time they were interested, not because Adrian was a veil. In fact, the partner leading the meeting made a point of asking how much family capital had gone into the company. 0, I said. Directly or indirectly? 0. Loans? No. Personal guarantees? No. Free office space? No. Adrian's compensation? Same founder salary as mine. The partner leaned back. Good. Adrian did not smile later. He told me the question had bothered him. It was fair. I know. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt. I looked at him. That was new. Adrian had started therapy after we broke up. He did not tell me details. He did tell me when something hurt. The difference was enormous. I'm sorry, I said. Thank you. Then we went back to work. I missed him constantly, not the intensity of our relationship, the small things, his terrible handwriting, the way he read menus before entering restaurants because he hated deciding while people waited, the half smile when he knew I was wrong but wanted me to discover it myself. I also liked who I was without him. That truth scared me less than it once would have. In my first life, independence had felt like something I practiced between relationships. Now it was simply a condition of being alive. The first sign of real trouble came from a repository access alert. Our security settings flagged an old user account downloading several archived files. The account belonged to Dylan. He should not have had access. He had stopped consulting for Lumen nearly a year earlier. Our administrator had removed him from the active workspace but missed one legacy folder inherited from our university setup. The download contained an old pricing model, customer interview summaries, and a technical architecture deck. Nothing current, still confidential. I emailed Dylan, your old Lumen account accessed archive materials today. Did you download them? He replied 20 minutes later. Yeah, sorry. Needed an old class file and clicked through the wrong folder, deleted everything. Reasonable. I wanted it to be reasonable. I forwarded the incident to Adrian and Maya. Maya replied immediately, preserve logs, confirm revocation, ask for written confirmation of deletion, do not accuse. So we did. Dylan confirmed in writing that he had deleted the files and retained no copies. Access was revoked, incident documented, done. Except 6 weeks later, Wexler announced an investment in a new financial forecasting platform. Not for nonprofits, for private educational institutions. Different market, different product. The press release mentioned a predictive liquidity engine. I read it twice, then I found a demo video at minute 4. The product displayed a visualization, a stack liquidity waterfall showing restricted, committed, and discretionary cash over time. My skin went cold. Adrian stood behind me. That's ours. No. He leaned closer. The visual language is. The concept isn't. The architecture might be. I paused the video. We had to be careful. Suspicion was not evidence. I knew that. Now, I'll call Maya. She reviewed everything. Her answer was irritatingly measured. Similar product design is not enough. What about the download? Relevant, not conclusive. They invested in the company after he accessed our files. Still not conclusive. I gripped the phone. So what do we do? Preserve what you have, conduct an internal access review, identify exactly what was confidential and whether it appears in their product. Do not contact Wexler yet. No dramatic lawsuit, no. Instant injunction, work evidence. We hired a forensic consultant, not because Lumen was rich, because if we were wrong, accusing a venture firm of stealing proprietary information could damage us permanently. 3 days later, the consultant found something. Dylan had not only downloaded the files, he had opened the architecture deck twice, then exported it. The system did not show where it went after that, but it proved his wrong folder explanation was incomplete. I called him. He did not answer. I called again. Nothing. That night, Tessa showed up at my apartment. She looked terrible. What happened? She held out her phone. I need you to see something. My body knew before my mind did. Not the same betrayal, a different one. On her screen was a text conversation with Dylan from 7 weeks earlier. Dylan, they don't even use that model anymore. Tessa, then why send it? Dylan, because Wexler asked what good student stage forecasting products look like. It's not code, it's a deck. Tessa, Nora would lose her mind. Dylan, Nora thinks every idea belongs to her. Adrian could buy 10 companies like this tomorrow, they'll be fine. I read the last sentence twice. Adrian could buy 10 companies like this tomorrow, they'll be fine. A strange calm settled over me. In my first life, Dylan had justified cheating by telling himself I was strong enough to survive it. Now he had justified something else the same way. My competence had become his permission. Again, Tessa sat across from me. I should have told you. Yes. I told him to stop. But you didn't tell me. No. Why? Tears filled her eyes. Because I thought he'd lose his job. There it was, her version of the same old pattern. Protect him first, manage the consequences later. I understood it. That did not excuse it. Send the full thread to Maya. I said. Tessa nodded. Okay. And don't delete anything. I won't. She started crying. I'm sorry. I looked at her. For 12 years in another life, I had imagined what I would say if Tessa ever apologized properly. I had imagined rage, triumph, maybe forgiveness. What I felt instead was exhaustion. I believe you. Her face crumpled. But believing you're sorry doesn't make it okay. I know. That might have been the first truly adult sentence either of us ever gave the other. The next morning, we began building the case. Maya refused to call it a case. Not yet. We sat in Lumen's conference room with printed timelines covering the table. Right now, we have evidence of unauthorized retention and disclosure by someone who signed a confidentiality agreement. Dylan, I said. Yes. And Wexler. We do not yet know what Wexler knew, who received the materials, whether they were used, or whether the portfolio company independently developed similar features. Adrian leaned forward. What can we do? We preserve evidence. We send Dylan a formal notice. We determine whether he still possesses confidential material. Then we decide whether to approach Wexler. I hated how slow justice sounded when described accurately, but I had lived through the alternative: assumption, accusation, regret. Do it properly, I said. Maya nodded. We will. The preservation letter went out that afternoon. It instructed Dylan not to delete relevant emails, messages, cloud files, devices, or other records. It did not threaten arrest. It did not claim crimes we could not prove. It simply made clear that a contractual dispute was likely. He called me 6 times. I did not answer. Maya told me not to discuss substance directly. On the 7th call, he left a voicemail. Nora, this is insane. I showed them one old deck. It wasn't even current. Nobody stole your company. I listened once, saved it, forwarded it. Evidence did not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes people mailed it to you because they needed to explain themselves. Wexler responded quickly after Maya contacted their general counsel. That was a good sign or a bad one. I no longer pretended I knew. Their counsel agreed to an internal review and temporary preservation of relevant materials. No admission, no accusations, professional language covering panic. A week later, we learned the truth. Dylan had sent the architecture deck to an associate at Wexler while trying to impress him. The associate had forwarded it to a principal evaluating the educational finance company. The principal had then shared selected slides with that company's founders as an example of clean product framing. Nobody at Wexler had known Dylan lacked permission. That did not erase the problem. The startup's team had used parts of our confidential deck when redesigning their product, not our source code, not our customer data, not the core forecasting model itself, but enough proprietary presentation logic and workflow design to matter. The situation was both better and worse than the revenge fantasy my old self might have wanted. There was no mastermind, no conspiracy, just a chain of people making convenient assumptions. Dylan wanted to look valuable, an associate wanted to impress a principal, principal wanted to help a portfolio company, the founders assumed materials from an investor were safe to use. Nobody stopped long enough to ask where the information came from. That was how real damage often happened. Not because everyone was evil, because everyone benefited from not asking. Wexler proposed mediation. Maya recommended we accept. You have leverage, she said. You also have a company to run. What could we realistically get? Deletion and certification, compensation, reimbursement of legal and forensic costs, restrictions around use, potential licensing terms if any protected material remains embedded, public apology. Do you want one? I thought about it. No? Good? Adrian looked at me. Why? Because I don't want Lumen's story to become this dispute. He smiled slightly. That look still affected me. 2 years had passed since our breakup. Some feelings apparently ignored governance protocols. The mediation lasted 11 hours. I had expected confrontation. Instead, most of the day involved separate rooms, lawyers walking back and forth, spreadsheets, and long periods of waiting. Dylan attended with his own attorney. I saw him once in the hallway. He looked older, not dramatically enough. Nora. Maya touched my arm lightly, a reminder. No substantive conversation. I nodded to him. He swallowed. That was all. By 9 that night we had terms. Wexler and its portfolio company would certify deletion of specified Lumen materials, stop using several identified proprietary elements, reimburse our documented legal and forensic expenses, and pay a confidential settlement. The amount was meaningful, not life-changing. More importantly, Wexler agreed to support an independent audit verifying compliance. Dylan separately acknowledged violating his confidentiality obligations. We did not pursue personal damages beyond legal costs. That surprised him. It surprised me too. Why? Adrian asked afterward. We were walking along the Charles River. It was cold enough that our breath showed, because ruining him wouldn't build us anything. He hurt you. Yes. Twice. I stopped. He looked at me. I had never told him. Not fully. The river moved black behind him. City lights trembled on the surface. Adrian. Something in my voice made him still. I need to tell you the impossible thing. He waited. This time I told him everything. The first life, Dylan, Tessa, the apartment, the years I lost, the rain, the headlights, the student center, him sitting in the corner. Adrian did not interrupt. Once, when I finished, he stood in silence so long I began to regret every word. Finally he said, you knew who I was. There it was, the question I had feared. Not exactly. You saw the article. Years later. You knew my family was wealthy. Yes. He looked away. I let him. I would not rush to make the truth comfortable. Did you sit with me because of that? No. He looked back. I noticed you because of it. That hurt him. I could see it. I won't lie about that. He swallowed. But I stayed because you told me I could feel sick and still have handled something well. He blinked. You remember that? I remember almost everything. He stared at the river. This is insane. Yes. I don't believe in reincarnation. Neither did I. Maybe you had some kind of. I know. He rubbed his face. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything. He laughed once without humor. That's convenient. I learned from you. That earned the smallest smile, then it disappeared. So when we were together, you knew Dylan would betray you in another version of your life. Yes, and Tessa. Yes. And you still let them stay close. Not well. No. I accepted that. He was quiet again, then he said, did you know we would end up together? No. That answer came easily. In my first life I barely knew you. He looked genuinely surprised. You were a magazine cover. That's humiliating. You looked miserable. Better. I laughed. He did too. The tension shifted. Not gone different. Why tell me now? He asked. Because I don't want any more important surprises. He looked at me for a long time. Our old rule, still alive after everything else. I need time. He said. The words hurt. I nodded. Okay. He started walking, then stopped. Nora, I turned. For what it's worth, I don't think you chose me because of the money. My eyes burned. What makes you sure? You spent 2 years refusing to let me pay for dinner unless it was my turn. I laughed through tears. He smiled, then he left. Not forever. I did not know that yet, but for once uncertainty did not feel like punishment. It felt like reality. The settlement money stayed in Lumen. Every dollar. We used part of it to strengthen security, part to hire a customer success manager, part to extend runway. The revenge was disappointingly responsible. I loved it. Wexler replaced the principal who had mishandled our materials, not because of us alone. Their internal review found other process failures. Dylan lost his consulting job. The university also reviewed the original access issue because some of the confidential material dated back to our student project. He received a formal finding for misuse of restricted project materials. No criminal charges, no dramatic courtroom consequences proportionate to what he had actually done. Tessa ended their relationship. I found out from her 3 weeks later. She asked to meet at a coffee shop. For years in my first life, I had imagined her across from me in places like this, begging, explaining. I had imagined enjoying her pain. Reality was quieter. He thinks I chose you, she said. Did you? No. She looked down at her coffee. I chose me. I waited. I spent our whole relationship protecting him from feeling less successful than other people. Her laugh sounded tired. I knew exactly what he was doing when he sent that deck. Why didn't you stop him? I tried. Why didn't you tell me? You know why. Yes, fear, attachment. The belief that love meant absorbing the consequences of another person's bad choices. I had known that disease well. He loved you. She said suddenly. I stared. In your other life. My blood ran cold. You told her. Adrian had not, Tessa continued. Dylan told me about the two of you once, about how serious you almost got. She misunderstood my reaction. I relaxed slightly. He loved me in this life too, I think. Not like that. I looked at her. Tessa's eyes filled. He was always trying to beat someone who wasn't even competing. Me? You, Adrian, his boss, anyone? She wiped under one eye. And I liked being the person who made him feel impressive. There it was, her part, not evil, not innocent. Why? She smiled sadly. Because next to you I always felt ordinary. The answer hurt more than anger would have. Tessa, you got the grades, the professor jobs, then the company. Even when your life was a mess, people trusted you to fix things. You think I felt powerful? No. She looked at me. I think you were too busy surviving to notice how other people saw you. That sentence stayed with me. In my first life, Tessa had wanted to be chosen over me. Dylan had wanted to be admired beside me. I had wanted to be needed by both of them. We had built a tragedy out of insecurities nobody admitted. That did not make the betrayal inevitable, but it made it understandable. I hurt you too, I said. She looked surprised. I treated you like you were guilty before you did anything. You had reasons. Reasons aren't the same as permission. Her mouth trembled. Do you forgive me? I considered lying. No. She nodded. Tears slipped down her face. But I don't hate you. She looked up. That may be all I can give you, okay? We sat there for another hour. We talked about her mother, my mother, jobs, rent, nothing dramatic. When we stood to leave, she hugged me. I hugged her back. It did not restore the friendship. Some things did not need to be restored to be honored. Adrian called that night. First time in 11 days. Can I come over? Yes. He arrived carrying no flowers, no grand gesture, just himself. We sat at my kitchen table. I talked to my therapist. I smiled, starting strong. She said I was using the metaphysical impossibility of your story to avoid the emotionally obvious part. Which is, that you were afraid. I looked down. And that I was afraid you had known enough about my future to manipulate me. Did you decide I did? No. He paused. I decided you manipulated almost everything except me. That was fair enough to make me laugh. He continued. You tried to control outcomes because you thought uncertainty had already killed you once. My smile faded. Pretty much. And I hide information because I think being fully known gives people leverage. Also pretty much. He looked at me. We were a disaster. A quiet one. The most dangerous kind. I smiled, then he grew serious. I don't want to go back. My chest tightened. Okay. I want to see if we can build something different. Hope hurt. I hated that too. What would different mean? No. Assuming silence is space. I nodded. No. Assuming anxiety is intuition. He looked pointedly at me. Fair. No family intervention without discussion. Obviously. No deciding what the other person needs to be protected from. That one was his, I nodded slowly. And if it doesn't work, he exhaled, then we stop before we destroy each other. That was the least romantic promise anyone had ever made me. It might also have been the most loving. We go slowly, I said. Very. No moving in. Agreed. No joint finances. Strongly agreed. No proposing because you're a billionaire and emotionally overwhelmed. He looked offended. I would never. You absolutely would. Not immediately. I laughed, he smiled. There he was, the boy from the corner, older now, still quiet, less hidden. Can I kiss you? He asked, my eyes filled, still asking. Always. I leaned across the table. Yes. The kiss felt nothing like our first. That one had been possibility, this one was knowledge. He knew I had lived another life. I knew he could disappear when frightened. He knew I could turn fear into judgment. I knew his wealth would always complicate certain choices. None of that disappeared. Love became real precisely because it did not require us to pretend otherwise. When he left that night, he did not ask whether we were officially together. Neither did I. The next morning, he texted, coffee Thursday, not a founder meeting. I answered, yes. Then I went to work. 3 months later, Lumen closed its first institutional seed round. Not from Vale Ventures, not from Wexler. 3 independent investors participated, Adrian disclosed. His family relationships. I disclosed the prior dispute. Maya negotiated the documents. We accepted money that came with ordinary investor rights rather than rescue. When the wire arrived, I stared at our bank balance. Once I would have believed this was the moment my life changed. It wasn't. My life had changed in a student center when I sent Dylan money for half a cheesecake and walked in another direction. Everything since then had simply revealed how far one decision could travel. Dylan asked to see me almost a year after the settlement. I nearly said no. Then I remembered how many years I had spent wanting an explanation from the future version of him. Maybe explanations did not heal anything. Maybe they still mattered. We met in a public park on a cold Saturday morning. He looked good, not triumphant, not destroyed, just older. He had taken a job in procurement analytics for a regional transit agency. Less prestigious than the consulting path he had wanted, more useful than he expected. I like it, he said. That's good. We sat on a bench for several minutes. Neither of us spoke. Finally he said, I'm sorry. I looked at him, for the deck, for all of it. He did not know how large that sentence was. You were right about me. I don't think I was, he frowned. I thought you were going to become someone who hurt me. His face changed. And you did? Yes. But I also treated that like it was inevitable. Dylan looked down. I don't understand. You don't have to. He laughed softly. Still mysterious. Less than before. He rubbed his hands together against the cold. I hated Adrian. I know. Not because of you. I know. That somehow makes it worse. A little. He smiled without humor. I'd walk into a room with him and feel like nothing I'd ever do would matter. That wasn't his fault. I know. Nora, I know. There was real shame in his voice. I sent the deck because the guy at Wexler had gone to Northbridge and I wanted him to remember me. I thought if I showed him I knew what good startups looked like, he'd help me. He did. For about 5 minutes, he stared at the path. I told myself it wasn't stealing because you weren't using those slides anymore. You were wrong. I know. I need you to say something else. He looked at me. Adrian's money did not make it okay. His face tightened. No. Me being capable did not make it okay. No. Lumen surviving did not make it okay. No. I breathed out. That was what I had needed from the other Dylan. Not the apology, the removal of excuses. He swallowed. I think I used to believe strong people had less right to be hurt. My eyes burned. That is a very convenient belief if you're the person hurting them. Yeah, we sat there. Then he asked, do you ever think we would have worked? In one life we had spent 8 years answering that question badly. In some ways, he nodded. That's what I think too. We loved each other. I did. So did I. His eyes filled. It did not threaten me. Love was not an argument for returning. That might have been the final thing my first life failed to teach me. I hope you're happy, he said. I am. With him. Also without him. Dylan smiled. That sounds like you. No, I stood. It finally does. We hugged briefly, then we walked in opposite directions. That afternoon I met Adrian at his father's house. Richard Vale had invited us to dinner. 3 years earlier the idea would have made me nervous. Now it mostly made me tired. Richard had changed. Not enough for a redemption montage, enough to notice. He no longer sent Adrian business proposals through assistants. He asked before introducing him to investors. He had also finally stopped referring to Lumen as your little company. which Adrian considered a major emotional breakthrough. Dinner was quiet. Richard asked about revenue. I told him. He nodded approvingly, then caught himself. Sorry, you did not ask for an evaluation. Adrian stared at him. I nearly choked on water. What? Richard said. Therapy is terrifying, Adrian replied. Richard looked offended. I do not attend therapy. Clearly. I laughed. Richard did too, reluctantly. Thomas's photograph stood on a shelf behind him. I had seen it many times. For the first time, Richard talked about him without using the story as a warning. He would have liked Lumen, he said. Adrian looked down. Maybe. Richard nodded. No argument. That was growth too. On the drive home, Adrian rested one hand near the gear shift. I placed mine over it. He glanced at me. Are we becoming boring? God, I hope so. He smiled. Lumen grew carefully, not explosively. We crossed 1 million in annual recurring revenue. Then 3, we hired people smarter than us. We lost customers. 1, others made product mistakes, fixed some, failed to fix others. My mother retired from the community center. Tessa moved to Chicago for a nonprofit communications job. We exchanged birthday messages, sometimes longer emails. We never became best friends again. I stopped needing us to. That was another kind of reconciliation. Adrian and I moved in together after 2 years of dating. The second time, we signed a cohabitation agreement. People made jokes because his family had money. I didn't care. Clear expectations were not unromantic. They were one of the ways we loved each other. The night we unpacked, I found his old gray sweatshirt in a box, the one from the student center. You kept this. It's a sweatshirt. It has a hole. It is emotionally significant. He stared at me. You mocked this exact sweatshirt the first night we met. I had recently died. My judgment was impaired. He laughed, then stopped. We could joke about it now, not always. Sometimes he still asked questions about my first life. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. He never treated the knowledge as prophecy that mattered most. One night he asked, do you ever miss her? Who? The version of you who died. I thought about it sometimes. What do you miss? How hard she tried. He looked at me. Even when she was wrong. Especially then. I had spent years thinking my former self had wasted her life. That was too cruel. She had loved people, worked, failed, tried again, stayed too long, ignored herself, made mistakes. None of that made her worthless. She was not a draft I had been allowed to correct. She had been me. That understanding brought a grief I had postponed for years. Adrian held me while I cried. He did not tell me everything happened for a reason. Some things didn't. Sometimes terrible things simply happened, and the only meaning available was the one we built afterward. Adrian proposed in the corner of the Northbridge Student Center. Not the exact corner. The university had demolished the old building years earlier. I complained about this, so technically, I said, your symbolism is inaccurate. He was standing beside a new glass wall overlooking the quad. I knew you'd say that. You could have chosen the library. Too many witnesses. The river. Too cold. My apartment. You would have reorganized something while I was talking. Probably. He smiled, then his hand started shaking. That surprised me, not because Adrian had stopped being shy. He hadn't. People imagined confidence as a permanent transformation. It wasn't. He still disliked crowds, still rehearsed phone calls, still sat near exits at large events. He had simply stopped treating discomfort as a reason to disappear. I had a speech, he said. Of course you did. I forgot it. Good. Nora. I stopped smiling. He held a small ring box. Nothing enormous. Nothing designed for headlines. I don't think you were sent back for me. My throat tightened. I don't think I was either. I don't think I saved you. You didn't. Thank you. I laughed. His eyes shone. And you didn't save me. I know. We made each other's lives harder several times. Many times. Please let me finish. Sorry. He took a breath. I love the life we built because neither of us had to disappear inside it. That was the sentence. Not forever, not destiny, not second chances. That I started crying before he even asked, will you marry me? Yes. His shoulders dropped with such visible relief that I laughed through tears. You thought I might say no. You've said no to a lot of expensive things. You're not an expensive thing. Debatable. I kissed him. A group of students nearby clapped. Adrian looked horrified. See, he whispered. This is why I wanted a corner. Years later, people occasionally asked how we met, at conferences, at dinners, in interviews after Lumen became large enough that business reporters started describing us as a quiet success. Adrian always said the same thing. She sat at my table. It was technically true. It was also incomplete. The fuller truth belonged to us. I had died believing my life had been ruined by 2 people who betrayed me. I had been wrong about that. Dylan and Tessa hurt me deeply. Their choices mattered, but long before their affair, I had begun abandoning myself in smaller ways. I skipped opportunities because Dylan needed me. I made his promotions feel like shared victories while treating my own ambitions as negotiable. I used competence to avoid admitting I was unhappy. Then, after returning, I made a different mistake. I believed knowing the ending meant I understood every character. I didn't. Tessa was not born to betray me. Dylan was not born selfish. Adrian was not secretly perfect because he was the alternative. And I was not automatically wise because I had suffered. We were ordinary people carrying needs we did not always know how to name. Dylan wanted to feel significant. Tessa wanted to be chosen. Adrian wanted to exist without his family's shadow. I wanted to believe I could prevent pain if I made every decision correctly. None of us got exactly what we wanted. Maybe that was why we finally grew. Dylan never returned to the career path he once imagined. He stayed in public sector procurement longer than anyone expected. Several years later, he wrote to tell me he had been promoted. His message was short. Turns out being useful is pretty satisfying when I'm not trying to impress everyone. I wrote back, congratulations, you earned it. We did not become friends. We did not need to. Tessa eventually married someone I never met. She sent me a photograph from the courthouse. No elaborate wedding. Her mother beside her. A man with kind eyes holding her hand. I looked at the picture for a long time. Then I wrote, you look happy. I'm glad, she answered. I am. I hope you are too. Richard came to our wedding. He did not fund it. That had been Adrian's request. My mother complained about this privately because, as she put it, if a billionaire offers to pay for appetizers, we should at least hear him out. I told Richard. He laughed for almost a full minute. Our wedding was small. Professor Ruiz attended. Maya attended. Tessa did not. Dylan did not. Their absence was not punishment. Some chapters did not belong in every ending. After the reception, Adrian and I sat outside the venue with our shoes off. My feet hurt. His tie was loose. The night smelled like grass and summer rain. Any regrets? He asked. About marrying you. Generally. I thought about the question. I had many. I regretted hurting Tessa before she'd done anything wrong. I regretted not telling Adrian the truth sooner. I regretted the years my first self had spent shrinking. I regretted that somewhere in a life no one else remembered, a version of Dylan and a version of Tessa might always exist frozen at their worst moment. I regretted that Thomas had died and no second life had returned him to a university hallway. I regretted that some losses stayed losses. Yes, I said. Adrian looked at me. A lot. He nodded. Me too. Good. Good. I don't trust people without regrets. That's healthy. Probably not. He smiled. I leaned my head against his shoulder. For years I had thought peace would feel like winning. Dylan ruined Tessa, begging me richer, more successful, loved by someone better. That was how hurt people imagine justice when they were still trapped inside the hurt. Peace turned out to be less dramatic. It was Dylan becoming a person I no longer needed an apology from. Tessa becoming someone whose happiness did not threaten mine. Richard learning that love could not be managed through control. Adrian telling me when he was afraid instead of disappearing. Me waking beside someone I loved and still knowing which parts of my life belonged only to me. Sometimes I wondered why I had been sent back. There was no answer. Maybe there had never been one. Maybe the universe did not have a lesson prepared for me. Maybe I had simply been lucky. That possibility used to bother me. Now it didn't. A life did not need cosmic justification to be worth living. Carefully, Adrian took my hand. His wedding ring caught the porch light. Where are you? He asked. It was something we said when one of us had gone quiet too long, not accusatory, an invitation back. Here. He squeezed my fingers. Good. Across the lawn, my mother was arguing with Professor Ruiz about leftover cake. Maya was trying to order a rideshare for 3 people at once. Richard stood slightly apart from the group, looking as though he wanted to help but had finally learned to wait until someone asked. The people I loved were imperfect, so was I. There were choices we could repair, others we could only understand. There were relationships worth rebuilding and others worth releasing with kindness. A second chance had not given me a perfect life. It had given me the chance to stop confusing perfection with safety. I turned toward Adrian. He smiled, not the confident smile magazines like, the small one, the one I had first seen 12 years ago when a shy boy in a gray sweatshirt had let a heartbroken girl sit at his table. In my first life I had looked past him, in my second I had looked up. That was all. It was enough.